in advancing the cause of workplace safety. Um, my name is Jonathan Lamson. I'm the ambassador, one of the ambassadors for Nevada's Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative. Here with me today in the audience is Joshua Arnold, fellow RFW ambassador, and Ron Schneezy, the community outreach specialist for Foundation for Recovery, our parent organization. Foundation for Recovery has many wonderful programs serving the community in various ways. But as today's topic is workplace safety, we're going to be focusing on the RFWI, or the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative. Besides saving lives, which we all know is important, our primary focus is to demonstrate to workplaces the importance of acknowledging the humanity of those in their employ. We encourage employers to think about the culture of a workplace as being as important, if not more important, than wages. It's not just about money, it's about how a person is treated, especially when they're at their most vulnerable. Today, we're going to talk about that vulnerability and speak on topics that may have previously been shunned in the workplace to disastrous effect. We all know the importance of workplace safety. Anybody that took shop class in high school remembers the video of the rubber hand getting caught up in the bandsaw, or maybe the teacher was missing a digit or two. We all recognize the posters that we sometimes pay attention to hanging in the break room or the office area of our job site, the ones we pass by on the way in and out the door. Sometimes we look, sometimes we don't, but hopefully in the back of our minds, we're aware of the inherent physical dangers of our particular workplaces. That mindfulness of physical danger present and the training we undergo to remind us of proper safety procedures is important and does lead to less injury and death. We call this idea prevention. Speaking on prevention, the Dutch philosopher Desiderius Erasmus is often credited with coming up with the phrase, "Prevention is better than the cure." But we still know this to be true today. Preventing an injury or an illness from occurring is preferable to treating the affliction after the person has suffered. This is why most workplace safety protocols are in place to prevent injury. And what does it mean to prevent something? Webster's dictionary describes it as keeping something from happening or to take steps to prevent its existence from occurring. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the elephant in the room in most workplaces in America, one that's avoided at all costs. We all know the mantra, leave your personal problems at the door, or there's a job to be done. Don't talk about it, just get the job done. Well, the problem with this is that most of us spend a third to a half of our lives in the workplace. Our work problems are our personal problems, and vice versa. The mentality is common across most workplaces in America, but more so in environments that emphasize physical strength as a benefit to get the job done due to the labor-intensive nature of the work. Unfortunately, the same workplaces that emphasize physical strength often ignore other forms of fortitude that are equally as important. So, what are we talking about? To introduce that topic, I'd like to introduce you to someone special to me. This is my Uncle Steve. When a radio tower needed to be climbed in California, this is who they'd call. When a transmitter or a receiver needed to be repaired, this is who they'd send out. This man could fix whatever he put his hands on. I personally witnessed him rebuild a tractor from scratch. He helped me rebuild my first carburetor on my '69 Ford F-250 and replace the power steering and rebuild the brake lines. That truck was a piece of junk, but my Uncle Steve kept it going. When my stepdad went to prison, my Uncle Steve stepped up. He made a huge impact on me in my teenage years and in my young life, and many others, with his expertise and his amazing, sharp sense of humor. This man could make anybody laugh, and he could fix anything except for himself. Tragically, in 2010, he ended his own life. The person who could make anyone laugh in any situation, the person who was an expert's expert, who was important to many important people, the person who followed all physical safety protocols to the letter, that person can still be in danger and we'd never know it. The topic that we're going to be discussing today, the elephant in the room that most of us have been uncomfortable to address, is suicide mental health and mental wellness, specifically in the workplace. First, let's take some looks at the financial impacts on Nevada businesses of these topics. The National Safety Council created a substance use calculator based off of studies done by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, otherwise known as SAMHSA. The sample size was 69,000 people, ages 12 and above, and the estimates are using financial data from 2019. So these estimates that you see here are based off of Nevada businesses that are in operation today. A bulk of the costs are attributed to healthcare, staff turnover, retraining, lost time, and lost productivity. The mental health calculator, also from the National Safety Council, makes similar predictions of untreated mental health costs to workplaces. And again, these are based off of companies in operation in Nevada today. Beyond the fiscal, the impacts of untreated or ignored mental health and substance use has immense tragic effect. The number of suicides in the United States has increased, especially in younger people. In Nevada, suicide is the second leading cause of death for people between the ages of 10 and 34. As we see here, the number of suicides in the US went from 38,000 in 2017 to over 48,000 in 2021, an increase of over 10,000 people. Clearly, not talking about it, not addressing these problems, is not making the problem go away. There's also a difference in suicide rate depending on industry. The same poll, where many of those other stats came from, showed significantly higher rates of suicide dependent on the job. For the sake of time today, we're going to focus on the types of workplaces that are on the top of the list: mining and construction, which also happen to be some of the biggest industries in the state of Nevada. According to the most recent job-specific suicide data from the CDC, 45 out of every 100,000 male construction workers dies by suicide, compared to a national average of 14 out of every 100,000. Female construction workers also die by suicide at a higher rate than average, with 9 out of every 100,000 female construction workers dying, compared to the national average of 8. Only the mining, quarrying, and gas and oil extraction industry has a higher rate of suicide. A few years ago, Nevada ranked 7th in the nation for number of suicides. Though our national rank is now 14th, we still have a lot of work to do, but not just Nevadans. 10% of all American adults have contemplated suicide in the past year, and 90 of those who died by suicide had a diagnosable mental health condition. Diagnosable does not mean diagnosed or and treated, though. Just a few more reasons why access to treatment services and understanding work environments is so important. It's not just the increased rates of suicide and overdoses in these industries that's concerning. There's many other factors at play to make life more difficult for the average employee working on a construction site, drill rig, or quarry. These jobs take a hard physical toll on a person. Injury is common, and for decades, the favorite painkiller of choice in urgent cares, ERs, and doctors' offices across the country was an opiate. According to the American Addiction Centers, almost 3 out of 4 injured construction workers was prescribed a narcotic painkiller in 2016. And it doesn't look much better for those in mining and extraction. Those in the mining, quarrying, oil, and gas extraction industry use alcohol at much higher rates than any other, more than double the overall rate for other full-time workers in the United States. Last year, Nevada had 1,128 overdose deaths, 545 of those in Clark County alone. Fentanyl, the synthetic opiate, is the primary driver of those overdose deaths and increases all over the country, but Nevada included. To understand why suicide rates and rates of substance use disorder and other damaging factors are higher in these industries compared to everyone else, let's take a step back and look at some of the driving forces to suicide, substance use disorders, and other mental health challenges. We call these risk factors. Risk factors are universally harmful, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. These factors and more can lessen a person's ability to address the challenges that life presents. Marital or relationship troubles, financial stressors, injury, or death of a loved one. All of these things are in store for most of us, unfortunately. But to the person with several unaddressed risk factors, these challenges can be insurmountable for the person to address alone. These risk factors are also drivers of substance use disorders, as we have mentioned, SUDs. Taking a look at this slide, it might look like the norm for many workplaces, especially those in heavy industry. But for the person experiencing mental anguish or struggling with a substance, these normal aspects of a job can become insurmountable. With these facts in mind, I want to share one more personal story. This is my dad, Melvin. Dad was a roofer, and it was all I could ever remember him doing, ever. He was really good at it, though. Even though he and my mom split when I was 8 and we lived in different cities, he tried the best he could to spend time with me, often by taking me to his job sites off hours to do cleanup. I'd have a wheelbarrow, pick up scrap, and after filling it, he'd help me get into the dumpster. He made sure to have me keep an eye out for copper scrap too, and we'd coil it and take it to recycling on weekends. While letting me help him, I saw my dad work on every possible type of roofing material imaginable. There wasn't a roof he couldn't build. Unfortunately, after 20 years of roofing, he suffered his first major accident, falling off of a roof and landing on his feet, compacting his spine. He couldn't walk for over a year. When he finally regained his legs after the rehab process, he tried his hand at house painting, but he couldn't make enough money, so he went back to roofing. This decision would prove to be fatal, as Dad would fall off the roof of another house, this time a 2-story, and he perished. So what happened? In this specific circumstance, Dad was an alcoholic. He would joke with me all the time that he couldn't drink anything stronger than a Dr. Pepper because of liver damage that he had done to himself earlier in life. His injury, rehab, and opiate painkiller use reduced his ability to function at the same level he used to. Dad had no high school diploma, and he joked the only thing that he could read properly was a tape measure. He had no backup plan, no savings, no other skills other than roofing. Dad was also a bit of a rolling stone. Every year, a new girlfriend. Our visitations happened in different places constantly, so much I couldn't keep track of where he lived. So here's this guy that knows only how to roof. No house of his own, no savings, no degree, who suffers a massive injury and now can barely make it house painting. He's also an extremely macho dude. He always had a comb in his pocket, was working on his tan on the weekends, and he always kept himself in shape. I never remembered him talking about any of his problems, ever. I don't ever remember him complaining. I don't ever remember him talking about his feelings, ever. And yet now, I know he must have been suffering. Severe injury, no other prospects, no other way to support himself or help his kids, no social supports, no roof over his head. His whole life was roofing. In both personal examples I gave, what did they have in common? Both were highly skilled in their own areas of expertise. Both had been with their employers for long periods of time, and both had internal struggles that they neglected to open up about to anyone. One struggled with intense pressure, responsibility, depression, and suicidal thoughts. The other with a broken body, opiate use, limited skill set, no education, and obligations he couldn't meet. And neither one told anyone what they were going through. I think of it as being trapped in your own mind with no way out. It ends up creating a toxic internal dialogue that perpetuates itself without any outside interference. If we take a moment now, each of us, we can probably think of a few people from our own lives who may have struggled in the same things. Statistically speaking, 1/3 of all adults in the United States has a substance use or mental health struggle. Another 1/3 loves the other and are connected to them in a direct way. So with so many of us impacted by these issues, and those in construction, mining, and extraction at even higher rates than the general population, it makes no sense to ignore the problem any further. The elephant in the room has got to go. All of us have lost too many people already. So what can be done? How can we reach our coworkers, our employees, our friends, and our family? Like in many other aspects of life, education is key. Programs like the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative give thorough and comprehensive information about the issues facing workplaces and some ideas how it can be addressed with what we call recovery friendly workplace practices. In the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative, one of the first things we recommend to people is to recognize the signs and symptoms of a person struggling with a potential crisis. The list here gives a broad overview of what a person who may be going through a bout of depression, anxiety, or trauma might be struggling with, or perhaps they're struggling with a substance use disorder. As you can see, the indicators of a person who is suffering can be varied and extensive. That's why it's vital to the well-being of a workplace to be mindful of risk factors that can magnify, instigate, or contribute to those signs and symptoms. It's also important to recognize that not every workplace can take the same steps to mitigate these signs and symptoms, and that's okay. As we tell the businesses going through our program, you have to make whatever you do fit within the structure of your specific workplace. For instance, a remote job site might not have the same resources as one located in a city. So creative thinking plays an important role when it comes to workplace mental wellness and safety. Here we see some examples of workplace factors that could negatively affect a person's mental health or aggravate a current struggle they might be experiencing. Some of these, like inflexible working hours, can't be avoided in every circumstance. After all, there is a job to do. Knowing that, and knowing that that inflexibility can be potentially harmful to a person's mental state, adding to pressure and stress, what can be done? That's where the previous stated creativity needs to come into play. How can that stress be mitigated? How can it be relieved? What can the employer do? The best answer, honestly, is something. Something. Reach out somehow, make a tangible effort beyond the occasional pizza party or Gatorade instead of water in the coolers. When a workplace takes a genuine interest in the well-being of their employees, the employee notices. The next step in addressing mental health and SUDs in the workplace is to know yourself. Examine yourself. What biases do you hold? What predispositions do you have in regards to someone who struggles with a substance or mental health struggle? What questions come to mind? A common one is, don't drugs cause mental health problems? The answer to that question is one we might never fully know, honestly. It's true that utilizing substances, especially long-term, has adverse effects on a person's mental wellness. It's also true, though, that people with an already existing mental health struggle might use substances to self-medicate or cope with a condition that already exists. So rather than focus on questions without clear answers, we're stigmatizing mentalities which lead to further suffering and increased turnover for businesses. We need to examine our own biases and our own biased thinking to figure out how to ask more helpful questions. Until better questions are asked in the workplace, until stigmatizing attitudes in ourselves and others are challenged, until people are encouraged to open up about what they're struggling with, there's going to be more Uncle Steves and more Melvins. If getting help is seen as a weakness, if there isn't an environment where recovering from a thing is celebrated, nothing will change. Once we come to know ourselves a bit better, and once our specific biases have been dealt with, we can move on to becoming more proactive in our workplaces, which starts with asking better questions. These questions should be tailored to your specific workplace and address the job-specific challenges and workplace risk factors and difficulties that your people are dealing with. One of those questions, one we should all start with, is, what is recovery anyway? There's many ways to think about what recovery is and what it means. And here's the definition that represents the collective perspective of hundreds of people in recovery, researchers, and recovery thought leaders, as published by SAMHSA in 2012. Now that we've opened up ourselves a bit to the idea of education and trying to figure things out, asking better questions, the next step is thinking about the specific things that can occur in a workplace to help your employees. We call these risk factors. Protective factors. To put it simply, a risk factor creates problems. Protective factors prevent them. The goal of a protective factor is to increase a person's wellness beyond how a risk factor takes away from it. The creativity previously mentioned comes into play in a big way here when implementing protective factors in the workplace. Programs like the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative exist to help workplaces address these issues and to brainstorm potential solutions. Any community can create a culture of prevention and recovery. Your workplace is a community. Many of us consider our coworkers our work family. I'm sure quite a few of us here considers our coworkers our work family. And we end up relying on them, not just in the workplace, but sometimes in our personal lives as well. We pay attention to how a person is really doing beyond the superficial, how are you? We can discover opportunities to make a genuine positive impact. Simple actions repeated over and over can grow into something powerful. So it can lead to an entire workplace becoming more healthy, more well, more productive, more mentally healthy, more mentally safe. Whatever you decide to implement should also depend on these three considerations. After all, if an idea cannot be readily implemented, it's not going to work in your workplace. If the idea doesn't include any input from your workforce, it might not be impactful. And finally, if ideas and input shared and ignored or poorly implemented, it's not going to have the positive impact that you were hoping for. It's also important to note that though we focused heavily on heavy industry today, many professions are greatly affected by both mental health struggles and substance use disorders. Any high-stress workplace can produce a risk factor. So recovery-friendly initiatives and positive workplace cultures and as many protective factors as possible should be present in all workplaces. The more workplaces move forward with initiatives like these, the more people who can be introduced to ideas like workplace wellness, the more tragedy we can prevent. After all of the physical safety measures that we take thus far has not been enough to keep someone safe in their own mind. So to prevent tragedy, to keep suicide and overdose and other forms of workplace death from existing, to prevent it, workplace safety measures